All right, what's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Fast Five Sports. Alongside Jacob Gallant, I am Matt Infield. Excuse me, happy very cold Friday to you all, though our expert meteorologist here say a warm-up is on the way, and thank God, because
big warm-up.
Last couple of days, yeah, big warm-up. Last couple of days been brutal. I didn't sign up to live in Memphis so I can get snow, ice, and 15-degree weather in almost March. So we will gladly take the cold weather what is on the way back. Unfortunately for both the basketball teams in Memphis right now, riding a little bit of a colder streak. We'll hit on the Tigers a little bit later. I'm not going to call the Tigers necessarily a streak. It is just one game, but we will discuss later on. But Grizzlies last night coming out of the All-Star break, taking on the Indiana Pacers, their first game after the break. Did not go all that well. Now, it started out pretty well. The Grizzlies were leading by double digits in the first quarter, and then Indiana proceeded to score 50 points in the second quarter. They go on to win 127-113. A rough night for one Ja Morant, who was pretty visibly frustrated with his own performance after the game. Just 12 points on 4-15 shooting. Jared Jackson Jr. at 18 points. Desmond Bane back in his home state had 23, but not enough. And the Grizzlies lose their second straight game because you remember they went into the All-Star break losing against the Clippers after beating the Suns the night before. So I will say this about just the fan base in general, and I think Grizzlies fans are great, but they are, and they're really passionate, and that ultimately makes a great fan base. I will say this, though. This fan base handles losing on a night-to-night basis probably worse than any fan base that I can remember assimilating with, in terms of, at my last job, I covered the Bucks. I wasn't in Milwaukee, but you read stuff online and you kind of get the vibe of the fan base. I don't think that they took it as hard as this. Obviously, growing up a Knicks fan, a lot more losing than winning in there, so maybe that's just kind of apathy for yourself in terms of you expect to lose night to night, except for the last couple of years. But yeah, every loss doesn't have to be an indictment that the season is over and the coaching staff needs to be fired and you need to trade half the roster. Sometimes in this league, especially after you've had a week off, it's just not your night. I will say, it was, when you give up 50 points in the quarter, that's pretty embarrassing. And that is a little bit of an indictment on just the effort and kind of the heart and the will to in that game. And you did see a little bit of that in the Clippers game right before the break too, where the Grizzlies ultimately just kind of let go of the rope and never really got back in the third quarter of that game. All that said, the large sample size on this team says that they are very good. They compete really hard, generally on a night-to-night basis, but they just happen to go through spurts where things kind of can get away with them. And I think that the biggest thing where the numbers have lied a little bit with this team this year is, I think offensively they're great generally. Now, against some of the better teams in the league, this new offense has struggled a little bit, but I do think generally it is a very good offense. I think the biggest issue I have with this team, and something where the numbers kind of lie a little bit, is they clearly go through stretches, quarters at a time, where they just can't get a stop. And teams are hanging, pretty regularly 35, 40-point quarters on them. 50 is insane. They're not giving up a ton of 50-point quarters because obviously over the course of, that's a 200-point pace over a course of a game. That's not sustainable for anyone. But yeah, I do question whether this team can get enough stops consistently to really make a deep playoff run. Other than that, and then obviously, like I mentioned before, the other kind of big topic coming out of last night was, once again, the struggles of Ja Morant. And he, post-game in the locker room, my guy Mike Wallace over at Grind City Media, traveling with the team, he talked with Ja in his locker room, in his locker, and you could tell he's just kind of, and Ja said himself, he's trying to find his rhythm right now. He's trying to get back to that level he was once at. And I think it says a lot about the standard that Ja has set for himself, that in a season where he's averaging a little over 20 points and 7.5 assists per game, that he clearly, and I agree with it, is just not really anywhere close to the player that we've seen him be in the past. And I think there are a couple different reasons for that. I do think that this offense, which has so few set plays and pick and rolls and dribble handoffs and whatnot, I think they need to integrate more of that. And Taylor Jenkins has said that they are going to do exactly that and try to diversify, was the term he used, that offense a little bit more going to the playoffs. Because obviously, Ja and someone like Zach Edey setting screens for him at the top of the key, I mean, it could be a lethal combination. I also think that, with Ja right now, he's made it a point where he is not going to be as reckless attacking the rim and putting himself at risk for injury, which you can't blame him. But if you're going to do that, teams aren't going to respect his three-point shot. It just is what it is. He's shooting 31% from three on the season. Ja has not shot above 31% from three since 2021-22, 3 years ago. When you are that elite at attacking the basket, but your jump shot is that poor from the outside, teams are just going to sit on you driving to the rim. Mm-hmm. They're not quite giving him the Ben Simmons treatment, but they're going to give him a couple steps. They're going to give him some space and dare him to shoot. So, and I don't even know if I need Ja to become an elite mid or a three-point shooter, but it would be nice if he broke out that in-between game a little bit more. I'm not saying I need him shooting 10 pull-up jumpers a game from 15 feet away, a la Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard or Chris Paul, someone like that. But maybe instead of driving all the way to the rim all the time, his floater is proven to be pretty elite at times. So maybe break that out a little more. If he could get the mid-range jumper activated better, I think that would really help him out a lot. But yeah, I think that he's trying to evolve his game to protect himself a little bit more. I think this offensive system is a little bit different than what he's used to, where it was a bunch of just kind of spamming high pick and rolls and letting Ja get downhill with a big body setting a screen for him, and it's just different. I will say this, he is 25 years old, and he has just been far too good of a player for far too large of a sample size at this point for me to think that he's not going to get back to that level and probably get back to that level in short order. I was thinking another part of it. He kind of hasn't, he talked about rhythm and getting back in that groove. He hasn't really had a lot of chances to get into an extended rhythm this year because he's missed so many games in kind of like short little spurts. Like, okay, 8 games here and then 5 games here and then 3 games there. It's tough. He's played 33 games this year out of, how many games the Grizzlies played? 55 games. So he's played like 2/3 of their games, basically, essentially. A little bit less than that. It's tough. It is tough for any player to get into a rhythm like that. So I think he'll be fine. What do you have? Do you have general thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it is taking more time with him than maybe perhaps some of the other guys on the team figuring out the new offense. Part of that is he's missed a lot of time, but we're seeing Jaren's taking a step up. You see, like even last night with the shot chart, Ja took 15 shots, Jaren took 14, Desmond took 16, Santi took 14. So that's a really even distribution, where in the past, Ja was taking a heavy burden of those shots. And for a guy like him, who is not knocking down a lot of threes and wants to get to the basket, I think his game plays with a more volume is based in the past. So yeah, I think it's an adjustment, but like you said, he's too talented for this to not work out at some point.
Fewest shots he has taken per game since his second year in the league.
Yep, that makes sense.
He has taken, right now he's taking less shots per game than Jaren, which, to be honest, with the way Jaren has played this year, it's fine. Some people might think that Ja needs more shots, but with the way, as good as Jaren has been this year, I don't really care. And even Dez, Dez has not taken this few shots per game since his rookie year. So, yeah, it's a little bit. But Dez is shooting almost 50% from the field this season.
Yep.
So, we're seeing efficiency there that he's never reached before in his career either. On another Grizzlies note, another Ja note, there was the report and then the refute this week. I'm not even going to call it a report. Howard Beck, longtime NBA reporter, went on a podcast, I think it was, and he said basically, I'm talking to execs around the league. Okay, who's the next star that might be traded? Give me a name. And he said that one exec mentioned to him, basically, if the Grizzlies lose in the first round this year, if they flame out early, keep an eye on Ja Morant this summer and whether the Grizzlies might be open to trading him. I'm just saying. Again, I didn't take it as a report as much as one exec spitballing this idea. So then, of course, that blows up on social media. And I said, I can't blame Howard Beck for it because I'm sure this exec said it. And guess what? If you're Howard Beck, now you've got your attention grabber for your podcast. Grizzlies could trade Ja Morant this summer, even though there's nothing really substantial to back it up. So then after that, social media is on fire and people are discussing this, that. Give credit to Drew Hill at the Daily Memphian, who reached out to Zach Kleiman and got Kleiman on the record saying, basically, I can't blame other GMs for fantasizing about us trading Ja, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's fantasy. We're not trading him. And they went on to say, keep underestimating Ja, keep underestimating this team. We'll let our play on the court do the work. I think it was awesome. A couple things on this. I tweeted this the other day. And I've said before, like I am probably higher on Zach Kleiman than a lot of people are. Like I think he's very good at his job. Not perfect. Certainly things to criticize him for, but I think he's very good at his job. I think something small but important is that Kleiman really, really sticks up and rides with his players on all accounts. He has gone out of his way multiple times to praise the core of Ja, Jaren, Dez as the foundation of what he believes is a championship roster and the team that, the three of them are going to lead that locker room for the next however many years to come. But it's also showing support. Think back to Ja's off-court stuff a couple of years ago. Zach Kleiman fully supported Ja. And then when Ja screwed up a second time, he also is not afraid to publicly call out Ja and say, it's on him now. We don't care about words. You got to show it, basically. Beyond that, look at something that happened this week. He was at Desmond Bane's jersey retirement at TCU, which, again, that's just like a small little gesture. It's not this massive thing, but I think that for players, that stuff matters. He was at Ja's Murray State Hall of Fame induction this summer. Like, he clearly really rides with his star players. And as far as building a culture, that matters. And then this week, obviously, he comes out and pretty sternly puts to bed any thought of trading Ja Morant. So I think that he handled it about as well as you could ask for.
It was such a good response. It's kind of refreshing to see a GM be that, brutally honest, no, absolutely not. Because a lot of them will say, well, no comment or whatever.
A lot of them just wouldn't go on the record with that at all.
Exactly, yeah. So that is refreshing to see from a GM. And I honestly, it just feels like this is another level of fallout from the Luka trade.
Yeah.
In where apparently no one in the NBA is untouchable now.
Yep.
So, I mean, you're going to look at a young guy in a smaller market and go, yeah, him, like we've always done. It's when are they leaving? But, yeah, it's a great response to just shut it down and go, no, absolutely not. We're not doing that.
I tweeted out a bunch of clips from Kleiman's media availability after the deadline, and it was funny. I had, Kings fans and Bulls fans retweeting it, basically saying, wow, a GM that uses actual words and takes accountability for the decisions he makes. Yeah. What a concept. Again, I'm not saying Zach Kleiman is the best GM in the NBA. I'm saying that Grizzly fans should be very careful at the idea of trying to run him out of town because I think the guy, again, he's not perfect. He has whiffed on draft picks. He's whiffed on trades. But he has generally built a very good young roster that looks poised to contend for a long time to come. He has built a foundation of three young stars that I think can win a championship someday. They have found diamonds in the rough, a la Scottie Pippen Jr., Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson, even someone like Jay Huff isn't playing as much anymore, but still, you essentially swapped out Trey Jemison for Jay Huff, which was absolutely an upgrade in itself. So this is someone that I think clearly knows what he's doing. And even if he's not perfect, I think he's in the upper tier, maybe not tier 1 GM, but pretty high up there. So
a lot of fans in Dallas that would love to have him.
I promise it could be a lot worse. And kind of just on the whole idea of trading Ja. You kind of said it. This is all Nico Harrison's fault. Because once Luka Doncic, who before that happened, I probably would have said was the second most untradeable player in the NBA behind Wemby. Mm-hmm. Shout out Wemby. Hope you get well, by the way. He's dealing with deep vein thrombosis, I think is the medical term. It's blood clot in his shoulder. Thank God, by the way, they caught it early enough, because if you don't catch it early enough, that could become, a pulmonary embolism, which is like a blood clot in your lungs, and then that could get really scary. So, out for the rest of the season. Hopefully he's back for a start of next season. More on that in a second, just in terms of Grizzlies effect. But before the Luka trade, I would have said he was the second most untradeable player in the league. But like you said, once a player that good and that young gets dealt, all bets are off. I mean, anyone can be had basically, except for, I guess, Wemby.
And apparently the price isn't that high either.
Right. And here's the thing. If you're the Grizzlies, and why you would never do this, and why you should never entertain it anytime soon. As we saw with Luka, you will never get appropriate value on a player that good and that young. You're never going to get everything back that you should. If you're going to trade a player of Ja's caliber, it would probably be because you have a very top-heavy roster without the requisite depth to compete. Guess what? Depth ain't the Grizzlies' problem. The Grizzlies might almost be too deep. They probably have too many good to competent to solid players. They probably need to consolidate. You're not trading him for that. So if you're not trading him for like 4 or 5 pieces or draft picks or whatever, then the only logical trade is like a 1-for-1 essentially, or maybe a 2-for-1. There's no logical 1-for-1 deal. The only other young point guard that I think I would trade Ja for would be SGA. You think the Thunder are trading SGA anytime soon? Especially to a conference rival?
I would say he's probably the second most untouchable player at the moment.
Right now, I think I would agree with you, yeah. I don't think he's going anywhere. And all these other young-ish point guards in that realm, I'm not trading Ja Morant for Tyrese Halliburton. Or I saw a couple people suggest Trae Young this week on Grizz Twitter. No. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No shot.
I would hesitate.
You're not doing the 1-for-1 there. Again, Kleiman has repeatedly said over and over again, the young core, and he always starts Ja, Jaren, Dez. It is always those three, and he has repeated it over and over again. Along those lines, Ja is on the same timeline as Jaren and Dez. So, I mean, you kind of can't ask for anything more in terms of that and having your young stars all in the same age group. And at last, but not least, and we saw it play out in Dallas, I cannot even begin to describe how unpopular trading Ja Morant would be. I mean, you think Luka was bad in Dallas? I think it would be even worse here, to be honest. Because you got to remember, if you're a Mavericks fan, at least you had Dirk Nowitzki to fall back on, where you've had this legendary kind of homegrown player that you won a championship with. You got a statue. He did it all. And you wanted Luka to be that next guy. But at least you had that guy in Dirk.
I would hesitate. I would hesitate to say worse, because it's been about as bad as it could possibly be. Just the pure reaction.
I think it would be. I think it would be equal.
Absolutely nobody. Yeah, equal.
I think it would be
absolutely
equal.
Nobody's happy about it.
I think
from Dallas' side.
No, for sure. But I think part of it is, again, I say, with all due respect to the core 4 guys, Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Mike Conley, Tony Allen, this city has never had a player for their NBA franchise, a superstar of that level to call their own, like Ja Morant. Never. So trading that guy away at this age, before he's even in the theoretical prime of his career, I shudder to think what would happen at FedEx Forum. It would be really, really bad. Again, it's not happening. Certainly not anytime soon. Kleiman put all those rumors to bed. So I think now we can move forward without that ridiculousness.
We're not in the Pau Gasol days of that team was just so bad they had to trade their one asset.
Brown. On that note, I did want to hit real quick. So I mentioned before, Victor Wembanyama out for the season with this blood clot issue in his shoulder. What it does do for the Grizzlies, and specifically one Jaren Jackson Jr., is Jaren is now the betting favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year for the second time. It would be the second time in the last 3 years. And if you go by FanDuel odds, it's basically, at the moment, a two-horse race between Jaren and Evan Mobley. So, and I mean, Wemby was the enormous favorite. Like, minus, I think, like 3,500 or something like that. A huge, huge favorite. So, now Jaren's in a real position to possibly win that award again. What it also does is it creates another opening for an All-NBA spot, which I think Jaren is on track to make regardless, but that path gets a little bit easier now. A reminder, if Jaren accomplishes either one of those things, Defensive Player of the Year or All-NBA, he is eligible for a Supermax extension this summer that could make him the highest paid player in the history of the league. It would be a 5-year, $345 million extension. I know there's some thought that maybe they don't sign him to that. Maybe it's more like $300 to give them a little bit more flexibility. Thing is, if you're a Grizzlies fan, you probably want him to be eligible for the Supermax because basically, if you remember the contract extension they signed Jaren to after, I think it was the 21-22 season, or no, it would have been after 21. It's a declining contract, and the way it works is basically they can only extend him right now to a certain percentage of that contract. And it is not nearly what he could get on the open market. So basically the simplest way to put it is if the Grizzlies can't sign him to a Supermax with him making All-NBA or Defensive Player of the Year, in theory, it opens the door to him leaving in free agency simply because it would be in 2026, simply because he could make significantly more money on the open market. Now, he could hit free agency and the Grizzlies could give him a contract that no one else could. But, again, you want to get these guys. You don't want them to hit free agency.
Right.
You don't want to open that door whatsoever. You want to lock them up ahead of their contract year. So the easiest way for that to happen and to avoid the risk of Jaren hitting free agency would be if he's eligible to sign the Supermax this summer. So you probably want to root for Jaren to either win Defensive Player of the Year or make All-NBA or both because it'll take a lot of uncertainty out of this summer.
Yeah, so Jaren's making $25 million this year.
Incredible market.
$23 million.
Incredible.
That is a huge
one of the biggest
bargain.
The way he's playing right now, the biggest bargain contract in the NBA.
It is very rare to see the declining contract like that in these days. But on the flip side of that is that's going to be three players making a ton of money, and then these new salary deals with the
second apron,
the aprons.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
you kind of have to win with those guys.
Yeah, that's why I think I've read there's a thought that maybe instead of the full Supermax, it could give him like 5 years, $300 million, gives them a little more flexibility with Ja and Bane already making the money they are. So we'll see. I mean, Jaren fully deserves a whole boatload of money, especially the way he's played this year. So, and you want to keep. At the end of the day, depth is great and depth is important. You need a certain level of high-end star power to win at the highest level in the NBA. So,
more deserving of a Supermax than Luka?
I don't know about all that, but if you ask Nico Harrison, he might say so. I kind of get the sense Nico Harrison, other than the fact that he was connected to Anthony Davis from their days at Nike, Nico Harrison might have done a deal surrounding Luka Doncic and Jaren Jackson Jr. since seemingly that's the kind of player he wants, but neither here nor there.
Can't roll it out.
Grizz, do we have a schedule or not? If not,
yes, I do.
All right, cool. Because obviously we've talked about the second half or the post-All-Star break is going to be much tougher than the first half was. I think they have the fourth most difficult schedule remaining. Rest of season, they are right back at it tonight on the second night of a back-to-back against the Magic, who really struggled to score the basketball, but can be a great defensive team. Sunday's going to be fun. Sunday is a nationally televised game on ESPN at the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are not the best team record-wise in the NBA anymore, but are still on top of the Eastern Conference. They are one of the elite teams in the league this year. They had 2 games at home. Next week, they host the Suns on Tuesday. And the Suns lost on national TV last night to a Wemby-less Spurs team, which is not a great look. Yeah, I don't know what the Suns are doing. They seem primed for a hard reset this summer. Host the Knicks next Friday. Very much looking forward to that. Really looking forward to that. That'll be a good test, too, considering what the Knicks did to the Grizzlies a couple weeks ago at MSG. And then hosting, 3 games at home next week because they host the Spurs next Saturday night. Again, no Victor Wembanyama for that one, unfortunately. The Grizzlies, I think they have 4 home games the entire month of February. Obviously, you've got the All-Star break mixed in there. They have a lot of home games in March. So that's going to be the one thing, even if the schedule is tougher, they're going to be back home at a place where they've been so tough to beat this year. And that could give you the cushion you need because right now, as of last night, they've now fallen behind the Nuggets for the 2 seed in the West. They are in the 3 spot. So
Nuggets are red hot right now.
I said it'd be fun, but a potential Nuggets-Grizzlies second-round matchup would be a little bit scary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, when you're going up against...
I don't think anyone wants to see Denver right now.
You're going up against the best player in the world and a core that won a championship 2 years ago. So, You know what? If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, and you got to beat teams that have done it before. All right, we're going to take a quick 30-second timeout, and when we come back, we're going to talk some Tiger basketball ahead of their home matchup against FAU and some seeding discussion. Penny Hardaway had some interesting comments today at his press conference. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back into Fast 5 Sports alongside Jacob Gallant. I am Matt Infield. Let's talk some Tiger basketball. They have had a couple of days to sulk in their wounds after a really tough overtime loss on the road at Wichita State this past Sunday, 84-79. Their second loss in conference play dropped them to number 22 in the country. I think I've seen a pretty common theme in both of their conference losses so far this season, and that is kind of just losing the 50-50 balls, losing the offensive rebounding battle. Now, they lost it way worse in their first conference loss at Temple than they did against Wichita State on Sunday, but still felt like every time the Shockers got the ball at the rim, they were getting an extra possession out of it just because they were making all the hustle plays. And even with all that said, Tigers had a real chance to win that game up to with the ball with like 20 seconds left. Dante Harris fumbles it out of bounds. Wichita State goes on to tie the game, goes to overtime, and then Memphis just kind of went really ice cold in the extra period on their way to a loss. So with that said, the Tigers are now, before that loss, I think they were projected by most people as a 5 seed that could maybe sneak up to a 4 potentially because the NCAA released their top 16 seeds preemptively as of last Saturday. They released it last Saturday. The Tigers were not on there. So I think most people were assuming they were like a back end 5 seed. Now, after that loss to Wichita State, again, just their second loss in conference play, most people, or not most people, but a lot of bracketologists are projecting them as a 7 seed. And if you do the math, one more conference loss, and they're probably right back in that 8-9 game that Penny has talked about. They are so not desperate, but they want to avoid because the 8-9 game means unless you get a 16-1 upset, you're playing the 1 seed in the region in round 2, and you want to kind of avoid that path if at all possible. And that's despite this non-conference resume where they beat so many quality teams, UConn, Michigan State, Ole Miss, and so on and so forth. So Petty had a press conference earlier today, and we talked about, I asked him about, do you find it kind of crazy that despite all the work you did in non-conference, that 2 conference losses have you in this position, and whether they would be in potentially a better spot having a way worse conference record in a much better conference? This is what he had to say.
It's expected. I think that you penalize someone for their non-conference schedule or for their conference losses and not what you've done. I think that's really weird because you're putting the teams that we beat in position to be great. They have handled business by beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. But when you beat those guys and you have the amount of quad 1 and quad 2 wins that we have, that's supposed to mean something. But I think margin of victory is coming into play in a lot of this. So I really don't know. A win just isn't a win anymore.
Second part to that, you talked about how the lack of the conference doesn't get any respect. Hypothetically, do you think you guys would be in a better position if instead of 11-2 in the AAC, you were like, I don't know, 7-5 in the Big 12 or the Big 10 because they might put more respect on that?
Yeah, for sure. You can be 6-6 in the Big 12 or the SEC, and you'll be good to go. You'll still be last 4 out, next 4 in, whatever. It's just how it works. It's how they respect the conferences, and that's unfortunate for us.
So, I mean, just kind of think about that. Even though they are 11-2 in conference, he said it would be better for them if they were in the SEC or the Big 12 and 6-6. It does sound kind of ridiculous. I know the American is a poor conference this year. There is no denying it. But I don't get where the benefit comes. And, he said something else later on about, do they, moving forward, do they just schedule a terrible non-conference and then hope they go perfect in conference play? And I just don't know what the benefit is. They have Penny, to his credit, schedules a really difficult non-conference schedule every single year. The last couple of years, they've done really well in that schedule, beating some really high-profile teams on the road and in neutral sites. And despite that, 2 losses in conference play, and I'll throw in the Arkansas State loss as well, because that's clearly something that's bringing them down a little bit. But it almost feels like all the work that they did has been undone. And I will say this about the American, and Penny brings this up all the time, and people might get tired of hearing him talk about T-shirt games and Memphis is every other team's Super Bowl, but it does mean something. When you are the team that everyone is gunning for in your conference, they're going to bring their best. And at the end of the day, conference play is a different ballgame than non-conference. And with the familiarity that you have each year, and I don't know if Memphis has a real rival in this conference right now, but teams that are gunning for them, I think that we have to take kind of that human side into effect. And the fact that they are the hunted in every one of these games and they are favored to win every one of these games is a ton of pressure, because literally your entire conference slate is nothing but landmines and potential hazards to your chances of making the tournament. So, and I also think that, something I discussed on a radio hit I did the other day, all the predictive metrics and analytics, and I am a big analytics guy in general, but, KenPom and the net and all these different metrics that weren't available all that long ago, at a certain point, do they skew the picture too much? Because we talk about things like Memphis a couple weeks ago, they went on the road to Charlotte, dominated the game for the most part. We're up by 19 with 4 minutes left. You've got the game well in hand. The game is not in doubt whatsoever. But they only win by 9. That hurts their predictive metric and win margin and all that stuff. And I don't know that I agree with that, because that win margin and the fact that they only won by 9 after being up 19 with 4 minutes left, the fact you only won by 9 doesn't reflect how they controlled the game, how dominant they were, and what the real difference between the two teams was. So I don't know where they benefit. Do you have to go perfect in conference play? And even then, I think that if you look at these 2 losses that they've had in conference play, keep in mind, neither one of them have been home losses. They've both been on the road. I think the prevailing thought for a lot of people going to conference play was that you could probably lose a couple on the road and be all right. But these are both on the road, and you're in this position. I almost think that they might be, this is something else that was brought up today, with this conference, and if you're playing in the American, your ceiling might be, your ceiling, even if you go perfect in conference play and do really well in your non-conference slate like they did, 3 seed? I almost think it's impossible for them to be a top 2 seed, or 1 or a 2 seed in this conference.
I mean, they would probably have to dominate the non-conference schedule.
They would have to
just
win
blowing teams
like
out.
20 points every night.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to play with what you're dealt, and we're looking. You mentioned the SEC, who's probably got 8, 9, 10 teams that are going to be in the
Basketball
tournament.
conference.
It's a basketball conference. It's a
Especially
baseball
this year.
conference. It's a football conference. It's everything.
Oh, isn't a football conference anymore though?
I mean,
Halfway
still
joking.
is. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately they're probably there's a good chance if you just win the rest of your games, you're probably in the same spot you were before losing to Wichita State. If you come out and look good the rest of the way,
if they run the table,
yeah,
run the table regular season or conference tournament too.
probably both. Well, I mean,
Maybe they could get back to a 5.
yeah,
Yeah, that something important did happen yesterday. They won at San Francisco earlier in the year,
yes,
and at the time, it was ridiculous. It was considered a neutral site game because it wasn't played on campus. It was played at the Chase Center in San Francisco.
right.
It was considered a neutral site game. San Francisco probably went, I don't know the exact distance, 10, 20, 30 minutes most away from campus. I'm actually going to look this up right now. But they were playing in the city where their school is. Memphis traveled 2 time zones away, however many miles it is, 2,000 miles, I don't know what it is. And it was considered a neutral site game
Yeah.
for San Francisco. This week, the NCAA said, actually, that was a road win for the Tigers, which took that from a quad 2 win to a quad 1 win.
Right.
So now they're kind of, get out of here, man. So with traffic, it's a 24-minute drive from the University of San
it's
Francisco
probably
to
all
the
just
Chase
sitting
Center.
in
It's
traffic.
4 miles, dude. It's literally 4 miles. Get out of here with that neutral site stuff. That's garbage. Glad they corrected that. So now it's a quad 1 win. So now I did see some bracketologists saying that they have Memphis as a 6 seed now. So that is a benefit.
Okay.
So yes, in theory, I think if they run the table the rest of the way in conference play and win the conference tournament, they might be able to get back up to a 5.
Yeah, I think if you lose the conference tournament in general, you might dip anyway. So they probably need to run that regardless.
I think they have to get to at least Sunday. Maybe they could lose in the championship game at the conference tournament. Maybe.
Another interesting level to this, hopefully it doesn't matter, but they are only 1 game ahead in the conference standings now, with North Texas and UAB both 10-3 in conference play.
And now,
So could come into play.
and now the Tigers have.
They do play UAB.
Tigers play UAB next Sunday. Do we have a schedule for Tigers?
We do.
So this will take them to the end of the regular season, I believe, because I think there are only 5 games left. Yep.
Yes.
So, listen, I think they should run the table, personally. Will they? To be determined. But when I look at this schedule, I see a home game this Sunday against a team that you smacked at their place to open conference play. Now, FAU has played better lately. I've gone on record multiple times this week, and I've said I think the Tigers throttle them once again this Sunday. Given the week off, they're going to be pissed after losing at Wichita. This is not, I don't know if it was ever really a rivalry, but this was certainly the team you wanted to beat the last couple of years. It still probably is that team, even if Dusty May and a lot of those key cast of characters are no longer there anymore. Rice played you tough at their place. You should beat them at home. UAB, you absolutely dismantled them here a couple weeks ago. You should not be afraid one bit of going to Birmingham and playing them, especially because Andy Kennedy, their own head coach, said after that game, our guys could have brought our best today, and I'm not sure it would have mattered, which kind of tells you what he thinks about the talent gap and quality difference between the two teams when they're both at full sawn. He thinks Memphis is much better than them. At UTSA, again, on the road, I get it. You should win that game. And my alma mater, USF Bulls, I mean, listen, Memphis went there last week and took care of business against them. That was one of their best performances in conference play. You should beat them to close out your conference slate. So if you do that, take care of business the rest of the way in conference play, and then that would, in theory, that secures you the double bye in Fort Worth for the conference tournament. You don't play until Friday. You only have to win 3 games instead of 4 or 5. Man, last year they were playing on Wednesday. Like playing on Wednesday that tournament, that means you had a really rough regular season. So I feel pretty confident saying that's not going to happen this year. But
Yeah.
then I think the path is still there, maybe to a 5 seed. But even that could potentially be tough. But yeah, I do feel good about their chances against FAU on Sunday, given everything I said. Like I think they're gonna be a motivated group, home crowd against a team they've already dominated this season. So I do feel good about their chances on Sunday. All right, man. Anything else you want to bring up before I know we're gonna call this a little bit short today because you're riding solo on the digital stuff, or you having a lot of day. Anything else comes to mind? I want to shout out real quick. I know I'm not even going to call myself a big hockey fan at all, but I tuned in a little bit last night to watch this Four Nations tournament, which replaced NHL All-Star Weekend. That was some electric stuff. Canada beat the U.S. in overtime via a Connor McDavid goal, which I think is like so appropriate that a tournament that elite ends on a game-winning goal in overtime from the best player on the planet. So, man, the NBA All-Star Game, all these other All-Star games could learn a lesson from that. And I don't know how you can replicate that. But on that note, the NBA All-Star Game format was absolutely garbage. Throw that in the trash and never bring it back.
I skipped it this year, and I don't really have any regrets.
It was awful.
I skipped all of it. So
go back to the East-West, or maybe we saw in the Four Nations thing with the NHL. Maybe you do a U.S. versus World thing.
I really think that's probably like an NBA priority at this point. Players have already said they're going to go out and do it. I think Adam Silver takes a good hard look at international versus U.S. for the All-Star game. And I think guys would show up for that.
What are the starting fives?
Well, international, you got Shea, Jokic, are obvious, Giannis.
Yeah, you probably play like 3 setters though, because you probably play Wemby, Giannis, and Jokic all at the same time. You probably have to play Giannis like the 3.
Maybe you put Wemby off the bench, or I don't know.
Shea, Luka, Giannis, Wemby, Jokic. That's a dirty starting 5 if you go with that. I think you could probably get away with that too. I think you play Wemby at the 4 and have him just kind of roam a little bit.
The U.S. is probably like the OGs.
Yeah, like
probably LeBron, Steph, Durant. Yeah, you probably get Ant-Man in there.
If Embiid should probably play for the world team, but he also played for the U.S. in the Olympics.
Is he going to make an All-Star game ever again?
Yeah, that's another thing as well.
30 games a year.
I thought about this earlier. Who's the best U.S.-born big man right now? Is it AD or Towns, maybe?
Man.
It's probably AD or Towns. Jaren right behind.
Yeah. Those are the 3 that come to mind.
U.S. Yeah, I think it might be like Steph, LeBron, KD.
I would like to see international versus U.S. I think that would be a good.
Yeah, that might be the way to salvage it.
I think guys would show up for that.
Yeah,
especially the international guys.
Have you seen the documentary on Netflix about the U.S. Olympic team this summer?
No, I will be watching.
Yeah, I need to watch it.
I saw the clip of Anthony Edwards talking to Barack Obama.
Oh, he said, "I'm the truth.
Content.
I'm the truth." Well,
LeBron comes over like a dad trying to salvage something.
But like that.
Great stuff.
Did you see the clip of Durant crying when he talked about how much it meant? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that an All-Star Weekend game would quite replicate those feelings, but you might get something close to that where there is pride and guys are actually going to play hard for the country.
Yeah.
So, because I know there's this thought that the rest of the world has caught up to the U.S. in terms of basketball quality. I certainly don't think any individual country around the world has done that, but maybe a collection of the best talent, the best international talent, it'd be fun to watch.
5 MVPs? 4?
I'm trying to think. Jokic won 3 of 4. Embiid, Giannis
2.
So 6.
An international player is going to win this year.
Yeah.
Probably Shea or Jokic.
Yeah.
They're dominating the MVPs.
Yeah, I mean, and even
Luka could win one.
I think you would say like probably at minimum the 3 best players in the league right now are all international guys. I think Jokic, Shea, Giannis, Luka's probably not far behind. Yeah.
Those are probably the top 4.
Yeah, that's probably the top 4 players in the league. So, yeah, I think that'd be cool. I would like to see that. So, Adam Silver, like I said, throw that format from this weekend as far away as possible. Never bring it back. And let's get some pride back in this weekend. And I think U.S. versus World might be the way to do it. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Fast Five Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. For Jacob Gallant, I am Matt Infield saying we will see you back here next Friday.